US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who's at the G20 summit in India, has tweeted that he's had a productive meeting with Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyeama. Mr. Blinken said they discussed Nigeria's elections and that Nigeria is a critical partner in Africa and beyond. And the US State Department has congratulated the President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has also congratulated Bola Tinubu on his election victory. Mr. Sunak said on Twitter that he looked forward to growing security and trade ties, opening opportunities for business and creating prosperity in both countries. Well, to look at how this result is being seen internationally, I'm joined now on the line from London by the former British diplomat and current director of the Royal African Society, Dr. Nicholas Westcott, who is also a research associate at the Centre for International Studies and Diplomacy at the University of London. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Dr. Westcott. And I know that you've been following Nigerian elections very closely. What's your reaction to the results, which has essentially kept the governing APC party in power?
My reaction is twofold. On the one hand, it appears that Bola Tinubu did achieve a majority of votes. But secondly, it's a qualified mandate. Far more people voted for opposition parties than for the APC. Getting on for double. So it is a very qualified mandate. And though victorious and declared, there are challenges, and that will be no doubt taken through the courts, as we have seen in other African countries. So there is acceptance, I think, of the result broadly internationally, but people are aware that it is not necessarily a strong mandate and that he will have to rule within certain confines. The various electoral observation missions have begun to declare. The EU said they were aware of allegations and accusations of corrupt practices. The ECOWAS team appealed for continuing calm and acceptance and legal due process. And the Commonwealth team was actually relatively positive in a way, referred to largely peaceful process. A very vibrant youth participation. So I think the international community is not going to take a strong position. They will accept the results as announced and wait and see the Nigerian processes will take their course.
Well, I mean, you yourself have been a close observer of Nigerian politics. I mean, you also are the director of the Royal African Society that essentially speaks both to Africans and to the international community and tries to point both sides in the right direction. Do you see this election as an important step forward in Nigeria's democratic journey or a step backwards?
It's both. On the one hand, there are many in Nigeria and outside who are disappointed that we seem to be continuing with the same old system, the APC party, the old machinery politics. It has come out on top in this election. But secondly, on the good side, it does show a sea change, I think, in the maturity of Nigerian democracy, because it is not just the old machine politics that has demonstrated its force. The enormous vote, 6 million votes for Peter Obi, are not for a machine. They are not for the APC or PDP. They're not for the local bigwigs. They are for him personally, because there was huge credibility in the message he was giving amongst a large part of the population. And the spread of the vote for him has been very significant. And this, I think, is something that, while it was not successful this time, is going to significantly change the nature of Nigerian politics. And the old machine politics, the local power brokers cobbling together a coalition and passing out the money amongst themselves, is going to become more and more difficult to achieve because the people are unhappy with that. And this is really going to impact on Bola Tinubu's administration. He's going to have a much more demanding public to which he will have to respond if he is going to stay in power.
Well, that's a very good point. And as you know, that opposition, not just the Labour Party, but the PDP as well, they both cried foul over what they see as a very imperfect process. But assuming, as it looks, as though that's going to be the case, Bola Tinubu goes ahead and gets sworn in May. Let's talk about the priorities of the new leadership going forward. The economy, of course, being one of them. Oil production has fallen to its lowest point in nearly 30 years. Refining of oil, which is where the real money is made, is woefully non-existent. We've seen crippling petrol shortages. We've seen a cash shortage. How big will the economic work be for Bola Tinubu, and what would you say is the most urgent economic priority for him?
On the economic side, it is quite clear that the economy is increasingly crippled by the level of corruption, and therefore the inefficient allocation of resources and the hesitation of significant foreign investors to come into Nigeria. And that is going to be a real challenge for President Tinubu once he is sworn in, because he has many debts that he pays. Many people have supported him because they want to carry on the way things have been going now, and that will increasingly undermine the vibrancy of the economy. There are tremendously vibrant bits, a huge amount of entrepreneurialism in the country, but it is stifled by this. So he is actually going to have to challenge some of his own supporters, for example, in the oil industry, to say, look, we have to clean this up. We can't have, a quarter, a third of our oil production being siphoned off for private gain, as opposed to providing a revenue that can then be redeployed for the development of the country and services for the people. He will also have to do something very significant about security, which has been one of the most significant causes of disquiet in this election. And that has a financial cost if he's to do it, but it has to be money that is spent on the military that actually goes to assuring security, and again, isn't siphoned off on contracts for arms that give significant knockbacks for favoured people. So there is a huge challenge for him economically. The potential is there, but realising that potential is going to require some very different policies from those in the past.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because I wanted to get your assessment of that as the director of the Royal African Society. I mean, you talk to people about Nigeria, and presumably they talk about investment in this country and the possibility of building trade with this country. I'm just curious to know what the specific things they're looking for are. And you've mentioned a couple of them, obviously one of them being the fight against corruption and so on. But I'm wondering, beyond the challenges that you talked about, I mean, there are opportunities, for example, in the tech industries, perhaps even better there than the oil industry. I mean, over the long term, are you optimistic about the potential for Nigeria's economy and wider regional impact that it might have as a driver and an engine for growth?
I think I and many are very optimistic about the potential of the Nigerian economy. It has resources, it has land, it has people, it has an entrepreneurial spirit. But investors that I talk to are still skeptical that it is safe to put their money there. Because I think while the rule of law is reasonably well established, international investors fear for their reputation. They think it is quite difficult to do clean business in Nigeria, and as they're operating internationally, they can't afford to take that risk. Now, there are plenty of Nigerians willing to invest in Nigeria. We have the Tony Elumelu Foundation, and many others. Dangote has just opened his massive new refinery. So there are people willing to invest, but there could be a great deal more if people felt confident that they could invest safely, securely, and cleanly in the country, Nigeria economy could take off very swiftly if those kind of problems